grab the microphone. Yeah. All right. We got some good content tonight. Yes, we do. And this is a conversation that I actually want to have. And the reason why I want to have this conversation is because we had a conversation earlier about this is some good content tonight. It is. I'm definitely interested in having this conversation tonight. Yes, I am. And the reason why I'm interested in having this conversation is because I think it's important that we understand where, right? It's important that we understand where the slander, not just the slander, the criticism, where this comes from. I think it's important that we know where it comes from, because we can't just say that a guy gets the same slander and expectations as a guy in another city would. So I think it's, like I said, I think it's important that we had this conversation about. I think it's important that we had this conversation about where you play in terms of your expectation level. So in terms of your expectation level. And I want to start with a guy that I watched, and I'm a big fan of, by the way. What's up, Kel? A guy that I'm a big fan of in Evan Mobley. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a big time Evan Mobley fan. Anybody that knows me knows that I see unlimited potential. I see a generational talent. I see a kid who I think has the potential to be one of the best players of his generation when his career is over with. I love everything about his game. Everything. Now, there are parts of his game offensively that I feel like they need to improve, and he's been a little bit inconsistent, and I feel that's largely due to the fact that he's young, and I can get with that. I can definitely get with the fact that he's young, and I think that there's going to be some improvement there down the line, right? I think that there's going to be some improvement there down the line. But the fact that he is in Cleveland, even though he was a high draft pick, he was a number 3 pick in the draft, even though he was a high draft pick, the expectation on him in Cleveland isn't the same as it would be if he got drafted number 3 by the Knicks, right? So if Evan Mobley is drafted number 3 by the Knicks and we're in year 3 and he's doing what he's doing right now, he would be getting roasted, even though he's arguably the best defensive player in the game, even though he's improving as a rebounder, as a big. His offensive game needs some work and it needs some refining, absolutely. But he's on an upward trajectory with his game. But if he played in New York, if he played for the Knicks, he would be getting roasted because he's not good enough right now. And the expectation that we have on these guys is not the same everywhere. Kemba Walker is a prime example of this. As good as Kemba Walker was coming out of college, all Big East guard, won the Big East tournament, won the national championship, arguably the best point guard in the country coming out of college. He comes into the NBA to Charlotte, and there isn't much expectation on him because that team isn't very good and that market isn't huge. If Kemba Walker got drafted in the top 10 to the Lakers, if he got drafted in the top 10, if he got drafted in the top 10 to the Clippers, it wouldn't really be that much. The expectations really wouldn't be that high. And the reason why they wouldn't be that high is because it's the Clippers. The fact that it's in Los Angeles doesn't matter. It's the organization more than it's anything. And during that time, when he came out, if he got drafted to the Knicks, if he got drafted to the Lakers. We're having a completely different conversation about him, right? We're having a completely different conversation about him and about who he is. So when you are, whether it's highly touted as a rookie coming out of college, or you're a big time free agent and you sign with a different team, it depends on where you go. The expectation for you is way different. It's way different because Jason Tatum playing in Boston, what Jason Tatum is doing, if he was doing that in Atlanta, I don't think that people would really be tripping on him like that. If he was doing what he was doing, what he's doing right now, if he was doing that in Orlando, like if he got Orlando to the NBA Finals and they lost, if he was making the All-NBA team in Orlando and making deep playoff runs in Orlando, I don't think this would be that big of a deal. As opposed to if he was in Houston or Boston. So I think that where you play, I think that that has a lot of implications on what the expectations are on you. I think it has a lot to do with what people expect from you. Anthony Davis, when he came to the Lakers, he was arguably the best four-man in the game. It was a real conversation between him and Giannis. A lot of people don't want to, a lot of people forget that. A lot of people think that this is hyperbole. This is just people talking. No. When Anthony Davis was in New Orleans, there was a real conversation about him and Giannis. But the fact that he was in New Orleans, as good as he was playing, because he had a 5-year stretch when he was in New Orleans where he averaged 26 a game. 26 a game. Interestingly enough, him playing for the Lakers, he'll have seasons 26 a game, 26 a game, 24 a game. That's not good enough with the Lakers. No. You playing with the Lakers, that's not good enough. And the reason why that's not good enough is because of what already happened. Well, what already did happen? What already happened was they won the NBA championship. With them winning the NBA championship, the expectation was already there with the Lakers. Let's get to the bottom of that right now. The expectation was already there. There's no question about what they expected from Anthony Davis when he got to the Lakers. Same thing would happen if Giannis, if he played for the Lakers. The expectations would already be there when he got to the Lakers. And the fact that they won the NBA championship, now we have a situation where the allure of what Shaq and Kobe were, what Magic and Jabbar were. So now you got James, who still got some good years left, and Anthony Davis is only 26 years old at that point. So now the question is, can you guys continue this? That's the expectation on him. So when he's 26 and 12 and 2 blocks and leading the league and rebounding, but because he gets beat up and because he breaks down during the regular season for a number of different reasons. Number one, after they won the NBA championship, the season, basically training camp, opened up a month and a half after they won the NBA championship. They basically had to get right back to it. He had to move to the 5. With him moving to the 5, it was a different position. He ended up breaking down. So, with that being said, there was different circumstances. The same thing happened the next year where he broke down again. So the expectation was still there, but he was breaking down. But he had stretches where he was playing damn good. Then we have last year where he broke down. But in the process of him breaking down, he had stretches during the season where you would get 35 and 15. I think he had an 8-game stretch where he averaged like 30 and 15. Something crazy like that. We had an 8-9 game stretch. And then you'd get 27, 25, 29, 24. But then you get 17. Then you get 19. But then it would go back up to 29. That's why averages come in. So when I think about guys, right, when I think about guys who are fine players in different situations, the expectation for them is different. Bam Adebayo, for example, like as good as Bam is, and I'm a big time Bam fan, but if Bam played in Toronto, you guys wouldn't be paying that much attention to Bam Adebayo. And if you say you would, you're lying. Because Scotty Barnes is up in Toronto and he's doing work. The work that Scotty Barnes is doing in Toronto right now, if he was doing that in Miami, or if he was doing that for Houston, he'd be a much bigger deal. Even though I think Toronto is the third largest city in North America, something crazy like that. Yeah, I think it's something crazy like the third largest city in North America, second largest city in North America. So when there's an expectation for a guy to perform, don't get me wrong. There's a part of you that has to live up to that expectation, 100%. I agree with that. But I can't put unrealistic expectations on guys, and I will not do that. I will not do that. I expect Anthony Davis to be what he was. I expect Anthony Davis to be what he was when he was in New Orleans. Anthony Davis is not old. I expect 24 to 27 on average from him. I expect that more consistently. And the reason why I expect that more consistently, not just because you're in the bright lights of Los Angeles, but the fact that you played in the NBA, you played at a high level. The fact that the expectations now have risen because you're in a bigger market, that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't affect you. I don't think that should affect you at all. So when you're playing in a different market, should the expectation rise? Should you have to play under the same scrutiny in New Orleans that you would in New York? I got a couple super chats I got to read real quick, and I'm going to get right back to you guys. Kelvy says, look at it this way. There's many players that went into a situation and turned the city around and had hype. Sampson, Brian Reeves, Danny Manning. Well, Danny Manning didn't really turn around the Clippers. The Clippers were bad. And they made some trades in the process. They ended up getting Ron Harper. They ended up getting Dominique Wilkins. They had Mark Jackson. So in addition to Danny Manning, I mean, they ended up making some trades. So I think that helped in some aspect. Yeah, I think that helped in some aspect, but I don't think Danny Manning made that much of a turnaround in with the Clippers. Suit says, yo, Chill, you're my favorite dude on Player's Choice. Thank you very much, brother. I appreciate it. I do what I can, man. I do what I can. Absolutely. So does where you play matter? I'm interested to hear from you guys in where you play. Does it matter, and why does it matter? Because when I think about expectations, I think about what the Lakers, what the Celtics, what the Bulls, what these teams, what the Golden State Warriors built, right? I think about what these teams built. And sure, you weren't there. I wasn't there when Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, and these dudes was winning NBA championships. But if I'm a player who, when I get on the Bulls, well, that's the standard. That's what the standard is. I wasn't a player when the Celtics was winning with Bird and McHale and Parrish, Jerry Seasting and Dennis Johnson. But when I come to the Celtics, that's the allure. Sam Jones, Dennis Johnson, Larry Bird. These are the guys, right? John Havlicek, Bob Cousy. That's the allure of the Boston Celtics. When I get to the Washington Wizards, okay, I wasn't there when they had Gilbert Arenas and Anton Jameson and Caron Butler, right? I wasn't there when that was going on. But when I get on the crew, the standard is John Wall, Bradley Beal, because John Wall is an extension of what Gilbert Arenas is. Bradley Beal, he's an extension of what Caron Butler, and so forth. They have tradition there. So because they have tradition there is expectation. And I expect you to hold up. I expect you to hold up your end, and this is what you're walking into. These are the dudes that played before you. So this is what we expect of you. That's why we have you here. And if you can't live up to that, then maybe we got the wrong guy. If you can't live up to that, maybe we got the wrong guy. When I think about a team, I don't want to be, when I think about a team that has had a great run, Golden State Warriors, for example, I don't want to be the guy that follows Steph Curry because I can't live up to that. No matter how good I can possibly be, I can't live up to that stuff. I don't think I'm going to be that good. And Steph Curry is the example of what I'm supposed to follow. Klay Thompson, when I get on the crew, that's what they're expecting of me as a backcourt player. They're not getting me on this crew going, well, just be the best that you can be. No. That's the standard. Right? Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, that's the standard. Before Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, they had a lull, but they had Baron Davis. And before Baron Davis was an extension of Tim Hardaway and Latrell Sprewell and Mitch Richmond. Mitch Richmond and Latrell Sprewell was an extension of what Mitch Richmond was. That's what the tradition is. So when a guy like Anthony Davis gets on the Lakers, well, as a front court player, you're following in the mold of guys like Jabbar, Shaq, Chamberlain. That may be a ridiculous feat to accomplish because we're talking about guys who are all-time greats. Now, don't get me wrong, Anthony Davis is a top 75 player all time. But I'm not really a big fan of using that as a metric. And the reason why is because I've heard, number one, the top 50 players, that should be changed. There's some people that are on the top 50 that I felt like should have came off. But that's just a different conversation for a different day. But Anthony Davis is an all-time great. So when he gets on the Lakers, is this a ridiculous standard to hold him to? Is it a ridiculous standard to hold him to what Jabbar did, what Chamberlain did, what Shaq did? Is it ridiculous to hold him to that? Because those are the footsteps that he's following in. These are the all-time great bigs that play here. And this is the standard that you're going to be held to when you get on the Lakers. And if you can't hold up to that standard, then maybe we got the wrong guy. Maybe we got the wrong guy. When you play for the Knicks, right? When you play for the Knicks, the standard is Ewing as a big. I'm a big guy, and I just came on the Knicks. So Mitchell Robinson, he's an extension of what Tyson Chandler was, right? And then Tyson Chandler was an extension of what Ewing was. These are the footsteps that you're following in. And because of that, right? Because of that, it's important that number one, you know your history. Number one, you know your history. That way you know what you're getting into. You know for a fact what you're getting into. It's not like you don't know, damn, I didn't know it was this serious. You see all the banners hanging up there. You see the retired jerseys. You know all of this stuff. Because you know all of this stuff, right? Because you know all of this stuff, you know the work that you're going to have to put in order to live up to that expectation. It's not just going to be, right? It's not just going to be, I'm going to just do my best to be the best player that I can be. No, there's a standard here. And it's not just the standard from fans or the media. No. These are the guys who came before you. Cade Cunningham, playing for the Detroit Pistons. The guys that played before you, Chauncey Billups, Isaiah Thomas, Dave Bing. That's the standard that you have to live up to. These are the guys that came before you, and this is what they did. So if you want to be talked about in the Detroit Piston lore, this is what you're measured against. And if you can't live up to that, then maybe we got the wrong guy here. Maybe we got the wrong guy here. I got a couple more super chats from Moody. Moody says, look at the Wizards, no expectation. Look at Poole. Actually, that's not true, Moody. And the reason why I say that that's not true is because there is expectation. They're not being held to that. That's the problem. They've had great players there. We've seen Gilbert Arenas, Earl the Pearl Monroe, Rod Strickland. They've had great players there. John Wall. We've seen those guys. So because we saw those guys, this is the standard that you're being held to. So because you're being held to that standard, that's the standard that you have to live up to. Moody dropped another super chat. He said, remember, Gasol after the 2008 finals got killed. Absolutely he did. But you know what he did too, Moody? He went in the lab and he got it together because he had to. He had to, which I gained an immense amount of respect for Gasol in that 2010 NBA Finals. Because what he did was he stood up. I can't say what's going to happen in this NBA Finals. I can't tell you that. I don't know if we're going to win or not. I can't tell you that. You ain't kicking my ass like you did the last time, no. I bet you that. I promise you that. You're not doing that. So I got a call on line one. Hold on, yo. What up?
Chill, what's good?
What up?
Kind of relating back to the whole topic of the stream. Do you feel like a team with more history, like let's say, I know the Knicks were in that sweepstakes for Zion in 2019.
Yep.
Do you feel like they wouldn't be as patient in a sense due to his on the court, off the court, like as far as injury goes?
Yes, he would have been gone. He would have been gone already. Yes, he would have been gone. The example that I gave earlier, right? The example that I gave earlier about Evan Mobley. The example that I gave earlier about Evan Mobley. As good as Evan Mobley is, and anybody that knows me knows I'm a big-time Evan Mobley fan. But if he was in New York with the Knicks, that wouldn't be good enough. Evan Mobley is arguably the best defensive player in the game. And he's on the rise as a 21-year-old. But it wouldn't be good enough for the Knicks. It would not be good enough for that team. They would expect more from him. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I understand tradition. When you're talking about Willis Reed, when you talk about Ewing, when you're talking about Charles Oakley, when you talk about Anthony Mason, right? When you talk about Tyson Chandler, big-time front court players. When you're talking about these kind of guys, I understand that. But when you're talking about a guy in Evan Mobley, we are in a time where where the public isn't nearly as patient as they used to be.
Exactly, yeah.
And because they're not as patient as they used to be, we don't see these guys turn into the players that they possibly could become because teams give up on them quicker than they should.
That's why I feel like with Zion being in New Orleans, there's not much of a history there for him to be compared to.
Right.
That makes sense. But I don't know. I just feel like if he was in a bigger market, like I said, like New York, even like West Coast, LA, around there, I just feel like there'd be so much pushback on, oh, we got to trade him, we got to get him out of here, just based on him just not playing as many games.
Now, remember, if he played in Los Angeles, if he played for the Clippers, I don't think that we would be hearing this.
Yeah,
Considering, who the Clippers are. This is who the Clippers are. But if he played for the Lakers, oh, absolutely, the Heat would have gotten turned up on him. Yes, it would have. If he'd have played for the Warriors, the Heat would have gotten turned up on him. But just like it's getting turned up on Andrew Wiggins, just like it's getting turned up on Klay Thompson.
Right.
It's getting turned up on these guys simply off the strength that there's an expectation and there's a standard here. And if you can't live up to that standard, maybe we got the wrong guy. So good to talk to you, Coles.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What up, Cal?
What's up, Chilltown?
What
up? I think it, to an extent, it does matter because it depends on the market. And like if you're getting like, say, drafted to like the Lakers or Knicks, Bulls, like big time markets, it's like your status is your expectations is going to be held to like they want you to develop quicker to compare to like a city like maybe like a Memphis or a Charlotte, Atlanta to an extent, which is unfortunate. But then again, so it just solely depends. But at the same time, it depends. For me, it depends on your position and like what were you like your success in college or maybe probably high school. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I said the super chat. The reason I mentioned those players is because all three of those players, at least in my opinion, and this conversation I would have with my dad, would tell me like, for example, when we talk about Danny Manning, Danny Manning was, NCAA champion, college player of the year, etc. And he was getting held to a status like, look, let's turn this Clipper. You're the guy that we're leaning towards to turn this Clipper franchise around because we all know they've sucked for so long. Right. But it didn't turn out the way it's supposed to be. And I mentioned Brian Reeves because there was hype for Brian Reeves because I'm like, okay, this guy right here coming out of Oklahoma State, I believe. I think
Big Country Reeves.
Yes,
he went to Oklahoma State.
Oh yeah, coming out of Oklahoma State, and like there was expectations for him, but obviously knee problems, ruined that. Right. And then and I mentioned Ralph Sampson because that's when Houston like, okay, you got your player, but they drafted the key next. So this is your Twin Towers, but then of course injuries with Sampson. And then Elijah won't turn out the way he's supposed to be. Right. So I think
with that being said, he did get drafted in Houston. Don't forget that part.
That is true.
I think that matters. The fact that he got drafted in Houston. If Sampson would have gotten drafted by Sacramento, as good as a player as he was coming out of college, even though he was a franchise player coming out of college, I'm not sure that the expectation, because there really wasn't at that time in 1983. I mean, Wayne Embry played for Cincinnati. He was a Hall of Famer, but that was 20 years previous.
Yeah.
The Sacramento Kings weren't very good. They were a dumpster fire. Nobody cared about them. They were still in, at that point in 83, they were still in Kansas City. They hadn't moved to Sacramento yet, right? So a guy like Ralph Sampson, when he gets drafted to Houston, which has a tradition, don't forget, 2 years before that, they had Moses Malone, league MVP.
Yeah.
It was in the NBA Finals 2 years before that. So this is the mold. They had Elvin Hayes. So that's the tradition of the Houston Rockets. So when they get Ralph Sampson, he's going to carry on that tradition, that standard of being a big. But then when they get when they get Olajuwon, it's going to work between these two. We're going to play both of these guys together, except this guy breaks down. That's the downside of it.
Correct. Right. I just think I want to say I would say me personally, it should be held to like every team to have a certain standard of like, okay, if this is gonna be our guy, and like you're living up to expectations, like for Kyrie Irving. I'm just gonna mention that Kyrie Irving was held to expectations to be like Mark Price, right? And then the next maybe or the LeBron, because LeBron just left,
right?
And to an extent, and we're getting all these players, and then we're just developing the draft. Tristan Thompson,
Right.
Drafted Deion Waiters. I mean, hate to mention, but I mean, I had no faith in him. Anthony Bennett to an extent. They drafted him, but then again, I had no faith in Anthony Bennett, me personally. But he was drafted number 1. When you're drafted number 1, that means something. That's like, okay, you're the guy. But I just think that for me, that how I look at it is like every team to an extent should have expectations, but at the same time, it's like not every team is going to be held to like that. Because if you're drafted by the Lakers, you're gonna they're expecting you to grow quickly, because in this day and age, everybody's impatient. That's just how I see it.
Yes. All right, Kel, I know where to find you at, brother.
Yes, Chilltown.
Yes, sir. It's just it's a sticky situation. I do understand that, not all cities are created equal, right? Charlotte is not Boston. The standard that Kemba Walker was held to in Charlotte is not the same standard that he's going to be held to in Boston. No, that's not going to happen. It is not. That is not going to happen. The standard that Trae Young is held to in Atlanta, as good as he is, if he ends up moving on one day to the Golden State Warriors, if he ends up moving on one day to the Knicks or to the Miami Heat, he ends up moving on somewhere like that, the standard is going to be different. Even though where he plays in Atlanta, there is tradition. Mookie Blaylock played in Atlanta. Steve Smith played in Atlanta. So there is some tradition there. He's one of the better guards. Doc Rivers played there as an all-star. And I think Trae is better than Doc Rivers. But the point is that there is some tradition when it comes to a team like the Atlanta Hawks. Now, I think some of these guys are unfairly put in the spotlight, and they're not ready. They're clearly not ready. And it's obvious that they're not ready. And they need to sit and develop because they are a project. James Wiseman is a prime example of that. James Wiseman wasn't ready to play. But with his skill set and with the Golden State Warriors on a timeline, because Steph was getting older, Clay was coming off injury, Draymond was getting older. This guy doesn't have 4 or 5 years to develop. Same thing like Jonathan Kuminga. He didn't have 4 or 5 years. Like this thing, you have to get it together. This season is a telltale season for him. It's a telltale season for him. And the reason why is because the standard needs to be upheld. So I don't get wrapped up in a guy playing for the Orlando Magic or Portland and the idea that, well, he doesn't get the same quote unquote smoke in, like Damian Lillard is a prime example. Dame doesn't get the same smoke in Portland that he's going to get in Milwaukee. Well, first of all, Milwaukee isn't a big market. Milwaukee and Portland are basically the same thing. It's not like Milwaukee is, I mean, they did win the NBA championship, sure, but so did the Trailblazers. I mean, the Bucks won the NBA championship in 2021. That's the first time they won the NBA championship in 50 years. In 50 years. So the Portland Trailblazers won the championship almost 50 years ago. So there is some tradition there. So the fact that Dame is now playing in Milwaukee, that is not the issue. The issue is that he's playing with Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's arguably the best player on the planet. And the fact that he never played with anybody like that, now the expectation, right? Now the expectation for him, right? Now the expectation for him has risen. It's not like he was playing in Portland with CJ. He was and he was playing with some pretty damn good players, right? He was playing with some pretty damn good players in Portland. He had LaMarcus Aldridge. He had CJ McCollum. He had Nurkic, right? He had good players playing in Portland. But it's a different spotlight when I'm playing with Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's not the same as those other guys. And those other guys were good. Don't get me wrong, but he wasn't as good as those guys weren't as good as this guy. And this guy just won the NBA championship within the last 3 years. So that's going to be the expectation for me. That has to be the expectation. And I'm on record saying that Milwaukee has a 3-year window. Within the next 3 years, they got to win it, or at least be in the NBA Finals at minimum. They got to be in the NBA Finals. So, what up?
What up, Chill?
What up?
Yeah, it's tough. I think it does matter where you play. I think it does matter where you play for the expectations that you get as a player. I think it does. I think if you look at Dame's, Lillard's career, the thing is, I don't think it matters. Actually, less to say where you play, but what you're playing for. I think when you talk about something like Milwaukee, who has won a championship in 21, I think with Milwaukee, I think the expectation was to go back to back and then win in 22.
Yeah.
But because they didn't do that, and now Dame's come to the team, now the expectations go up. So I think it depends on where the team is at when you come. And I think what the kind of franchise direction is going forwards. So for the Warriors with James Wiseman, they need to win now.
Right.
They didn't have time to wait for Wiseman to become a decent player. They needed him to win. As soon as he came in, they needed him to contribute because they wasn't in a good place. Clay was injured for the season. Draymond got injured. And then Steph gets injured for the rest of the season. So they need him to contribute. So then that just pushed out all of his expectations.
Like not in 2 or 3 years. Now.
Now they need him to contribute to the team now. And I think that destroys your confidence. Like if you're James Wiseman, I think that destroys your confidence. I think when you're told that you need to be a starting center on a championship team, I don't think you can develop very well. And then when they don't want you anymore, I think that completely destroys you. Because if you're a player who thinks you're a winning player and then the championship team says, no, we don't see the value in you, then what do you do as a player? How do you develop? What do you now look for in yourself to kind of say, okay, this is what I need to do? I think if you play for teams like the Clippers, I think the Clippers have championship expectations because they've been placed upon them and they've been made, the money that they spent for that team has made them say, we want a championship. But if you go to the Clippers intrinsically, do you have expectation of winning championships? No. But if you go to the Lakers or the Celtics, you do.
Yes.
And I think with the Lakers, you are compared, same with the Boston, you are compared to the ghosts of the past. So you are compared to Anthony Davis is a weird one because in his position, there's only been one, let's say, great power forward for the Lakers. That's Pau Gasol in that sense, would you care? That kind of was the great power forward before him. So he's the only comparison. With Anthony Davis being a great big man at the Lakers, he has to perform because all of the other ones did. They all won.
But is he compared to Gasol or is he compared to the best big men like Chamberlain, Shaq? I don't think he's just compared to Gasol. I think he's in that same category with the best big men, Chamberlain.
In my opinion, he should just be compared to Gasol because he is the guy who played in that position. And I think, and even then, that's a high expectation. That's a guy who won 2 championships and went to 3 finals. So I think that's that. But if you're comparing him to Shaq and Kareem and then the Wilt, he falls short like considerably. And I think there's where the pressure comes in because you're competing against, even LeBron, for example, would fall short against. You could even argue that as a Laker legend, James Worthy's above LeBron in terms of what he's done for that franchise. You could argue that James Worthy went to 4, 5 finals, was a finals MVP. I mean, there's nothing to say that James Worthy isn't a great small forward, but then you're comparing him to a Laker legend in that sense. So I think, but when you go to teams that are expected to compete, I think there's where it changes your kind of narrative. I think Damian Lillard now is going to be judged as a player if he doesn't win at Milwaukee as a guy who never could win a championship. I think Chris Paul is now looked at in that same light, that you never could win a championship with.
It's not
with
because he got on Phoenix. That's I 100% agree with you. It's not the fact that he played in Phoenix where the expectation was a little bit different because you got Kevin Johnson there now, right? You had Kevin Johnson. No, I don't think that's it at all. The fact that he actually played with better players, in fact, arguably the best players that he played with, there really wasn't a lot of pressure on him with the Clippers because what was the tradition with the Clippers?
He was supposed to make it. He was supposed to make the Clippers have a tradition, Chris Paul.
Right, because they didn't have anything before him.
No, like he is you could argue he's probably the best point guard to ever play for the Clippers. So if
Yeah.
if that is the case, then Chris Paul is expected to make a tradition of winning. And Chris Paul, now you look at his career, you look at all the people he's played with. It's just now you just say Chris Paul. He just wasn't going to win with him as your lead point guard. It's unfortunate for Chris Paul, but I think when you have now the expectation that he's been on 3 championship teams, you can argue he's been on 3 championship teams now. He's been on the Rocket, he's been on the Clippers, the Rockets, and the Suns.
Yeah.
And each one of them have failed catastrophically. And I think each one of them changed the expectations of Chris Paul. And now we're at the point of Chris Paul, in my opinion, is how we should look at Chris Paul, a guy who can just contribute and maybe get like a Gary Payton ring, basically at the end of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what it is. I think Golden State does that to players. I think when you play with Steph Curry, you're going to get exposed as a player that's going to be a championship piece, or not one. When you play with LeBron, you're going to get exposed as a person that's supposed to compete for a champ. Even Kawhi, for example, even Giannis. If you look at when they replaced Drew Holiday with when they got rid of Drew Bledsoe and they got Drew Holiday,
right?
You could kind of tell that the expectations for Drew Bledsoe to perform in the playoffs were too high for him as a player. You had to get rid of him. You had to get an upgrade in Drew Holiday.
Well, it was obvious, Amari, and not to cut you off, I want you to keep going, but it was obvious when you saw Drew Holiday in that lineup compared to what Bledsoe. You were like, that guy's better than that guy. That guy fits more than that guy. It was obvious from the beginning.
And Drew Bledsoe was an all defensive guy. Like he was a very first team all defense. And you replaced him with another guy who's first team all defense in Drew Holiday, who could perform in the playoffs. And that's the reason why I also think that Milwaukee's going to have some issues, because you can't tell me that you replace an all defensive guy in Drew Holiday and replace him for one of the worst guard defenders in the league, and then say, you know what, you're going to do so much better than you did.
It's going to outscore people. That's not going to work. That's
not the way. No, not the way. Not with the efficiency that Lillard has, and not with the way Giannis plays. It's going to be very difficult for Giannis just to say, I'm going to put my elbow in somebody's chest and just go to the rim every time, when Lillard is trying to fire 30-foot shots in the background.
Don't get me wrong, Amari. The way that Giannis plays, that translates into the playoffs. He's proven
100%.
that, right? He's absolutely proven that. But the one thing that cannot be disregarded, when you get to the playoffs, you have to be able to guard at a high level. And if you can't guard at a high level, we can't protect you, because teams are good, especially when we get later on in the rounds. When we get later on in the rounds, what we're going to do is we're going to run into better teams with better schemes, better players. And it's going to be hard to protect you if you can't defend, at least compete at it. The reason why the Golden State Warriors were able to do what they were able to do is because they were able to protect Steph Curry, because he would give that effort. That effort ain't there with Damian Lillard.
No, but I don't think Steph was that bad like Damian Lillard was on defense.
No, he's not. He isn't. He is not.
Like Steph could stay in front of somebody. I think with Dame, I think the question to me is when Milwaukee and Boston match up, how much do you lose from each person that you traded for each other? Because they match up in the same position. I think you lose significantly more on offense than with Dame than you do with Drew on defense. Like Drew's defense made them elite. I don't think Dame's offense makes the Milwaukee Bucks elite. I think it just closes a little bit of a gap that they may have lost on defense. Like they may beat you by 1 or 2 points now. And you can see the games are pretty close with Milwaukee, because they don't have anybody that can stop a guard in front of them.
They're in a dogfight right now with Miami. They're literally in a dogfight right now in Miami. They had to come back a couple of nights ago, being down 26 to the Trailblazers.
And that becomes hard. And if you look at, if you look at those teams, you can't. If you look at, I don't know if you remember this as much, but I think if you look at the 2017 season with the Cavs, and if you watch that season, 2017, it was the year after the Cavs won that championship, and afterwards they were like 23rd in defense. And it was every night LeBron, Kyrie, Kevin Love had to keep coming back. Even in the playoffs against the Indiana Pacers, they were down by 26, and they came back in those games. And I just think when you have to keep playing like that, does your body wear out eventually? I think with Giannis as well, he's been getting more injured recently. And now the expectation of Damian Lillard is now to perform, because Damian Lillard is a weird player because he's a clutch player who doesn't perform late in the rounds of the playoffs. And I find that's a very interesting dynamic. So I don't know now, as he's kind of been regarded as this guy that's supposed to move the needle, how do we evaluate Dame Lillard in a Milwaukee Bucks uniform to say, okay, is he a guy that's going to move the needle of a championship team with a guy who's better than him? I don't think Dame functions as a number two.
Right.
I don't think he's a number one, but I think he doesn't function as a number two because of the way he plays.
Well,
and
two things.
No, go ahead.
Well, two things. Number one, when you think about a guy that's getting on a championship caliber team, what can you do to get us over the hump? What were we missing that now you bring in order to get us over the hump? Because what we gave up was our staple. What was Milwaukee? One of the better defensive teams in the game.
Mm-hmm.
They'd always been that, right? So now what we're doing, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna 86 that, and now we're gonna become more of a scoring team, which I wasn't really feeling him and Giannis. And there's still a timeline, and the reason why I feel like there's still a timeline because you got two ball dominant guys, and with having two ball dominant guys, that's an adjustment period because I'm used to playing with the basketball, and add all of that up with the fact that when we get into the playoffs, like you just mentioned, wearing us down, I'm not even thinking about me getting worn down physically. I'm thinking about schemes and the idea that you can't stop this. So if we got a pick and pop action, so I'm watching Minnesota and Oklahoma City a couple of minutes ago. I was watching that game where Shai Gilgeous is getting cat in switches. No matter what kind of shape cat is in, you can't stop that. It doesn't make a difference. You could be in the best shape you can possibly be in. If we continue to get this switch and we continue to go after him and him particularly, there's nothing that you guys can do about it. We're eventually going to get that. This is where the great defensive teams come in because we can protect you. Where a guy like Jaden McDaniels is not going to allow you to get switched on the cat. He's not going to allow that, right? So when you're in Milwaukee, where you got Damian Lillard as your lead guard, and we're trying to get Damian Lillard switched on to Jason Tatum. Well, if he's in Milwaukee, Drew Holiday's not going to allow that.
No,
he's not going to allow that. No.
And who switched on to Dame as well? So if you're, and remember, they're going to basically attack Dame every time up and down the court. Remember, if you look at something like Cleveland, so you've got something like Mitchell, who's just going to just switch onto Dame. Garland is just going to take Mitchell and Garland, if they play the Milwaukee in the playoffs, they're just going to take turns on Dame, basically. And I think that with Damian Lillard, how much he scores on offense is how much he's going to give up on defense.
I hate that, Amari. I hate that. The fact that you are that much of a liability. That's why that's number one. That's why I got Boston winning the NBA championship. Because you can't, as good as you are offensively, we have to be able to depend on you on some level. When we get to the playoffs, you have to be able to guard. Have to. And if you can't guard, if you can't guard minimally, like Kyrie Irving will give effort. And then there's some anomalies. There's some anomalies. For example, when he was playing with LeBron James, James was so good defensively that he can make up for a lot of your mistakes. Tristan Thompson can make up for a lot of your mistakes. But the offense today is so much more advanced. The offense is just so much more advanced today that it's a lot more difficult, number one, to hide guys, and two, to protect guys who don't guard. Because
don't guard.
And he doesn't. He just doesn't, my man. So
because with Chris Middleton, at least with Chris Middleton, you could say Chris Middleton does guard you. Problem with Chris Middleton is that he's in decline and he's injured. So I think, how do you protect Chris Middleton now as well, being the third guy on that team? And I think he's happy being the third guy, but how do you protect him? Because now he's injured, and you're going to get him injured by trying to have him cover for Dame. You're going to get Giannis injured for having to cover for Dame. And you're probably going to get Brook Lopez pulled out of the paint if every time somebody's going to switch on to Brook Lopez, because Brook Lopez is an elite rim protector. But how much can he do? This is the Rudy Gobert situation in Utah.
We love dragging him away from the basket. We want that. We're trying to get him in that kind of action. Absolutely, we are.
But with Rudy in Utah, it's so hard to play when nobody else will guard, and you're the only guard. You're the only defender on the entire team, and somebody says to you, "Rudy, protect." This is why Minnesota is doing well this year, because Anthony Edwards wants to guard.
Well, isn't
And
that
look at
crazy though? Isn't that crazy though, Amari? Because when I got a guy like that behind me, that actually ramps up my ability as a defender. The reason why, what I mean when I say that is, I might not be a great defender, but I'm gonna be better simply off the strength that I got this guy behind me to clean up my messes. So I'm gonna take more chances on the wing. I'm gonna be more aggressive as a one-on-one defender because I know that this guy behind me, he's gonna clean up a lot of my messes. But when you on a team like Utah, even though they had a damn good defender in Mike Conley on the wing, I feel like Donovan
yeah,
Mitchell should have been a better defender. I do.
he should have been.
Even
I think
even though he came into the league as a defender. That's what he came into the league from Louisville. He came in from college. He came into the league as a defender. I just feel like he should have been better. I do.
I think he should have. I think he should have. But on Cleveland
Yeah.
now, he doesn't need to be as good as a defender because he's got Allen and Jared Allen on his team. And I think with Donovan Mitchell, he's another one of those guys that gives up a lot on defense. I think like to me, with Donovan Mitchell, you're gonna just end up just taking like look at that series against the Nuggets when he was scoring 50 and Jamal Murray was scoring 50.
Yeah.
That can't happen, especially when you're the team that's not as loaded as the other team. And I think that's one of the reasons with Cleveland. I think one of the things as well, like one of the things I can't stand about some of these players nowadays is that I'd rather you have scored 22 and provide good defense than give me 35 and none. And I think that's the issue that I have with some of these kind of younger players in that sense, because they're giving up so many points on the defensive end, and they're basically having a gunslinging battle. And then you realize it just comes to one or two stops. And I think that's what happened to Cleveland last year to the Knicks. I think with Mobley wasn't ready to kind of be that guy yet.
Not
And
yet.
I think Mitchell didn't perform to the level that he was supposed to. And with the way Mitchell and Lillard type players perform, they need to score 35 points to be dominant in a playoff game. If they score 22, because they've given up 26 on the other end, they haven't done anything. They're just basically a net negative on the team. So I think going back to your original question about the expectations, of course, I feel like with the players, and I feel mentally the players know that as well. I think when you are playing on these teams and you know you have to win a championship at the end of the season, I think it wears on these players a lot. And I think that's the reason why you see them kind of break down physically. I think sometimes you see them break down mentally in game. You know, you can even see it wear on the great players, even like LeBron. You can see it wear on the players like Steph. I mean, Steph was basically hyperventilating the other week because he's having to play, you know, like his team is in decline and he knows the expectation of him is to win a championship. And he's probably looking at these guys thinking, we can't win. Like, we're not going to win. Like, you don't think that these guys...
I'm too old. And I'm too old to keep doing this at this level.
Yeah.
I'm too old to have to keep doing this. Yeah, that's fair, Amari. Absolutely it is, man. It's good to talk to you, brother. I appreciate you, my man.
Thank you, man.
I appreciate you. You know where to find me at,
you.
my man. Absolutely. That's understand something. When I have guests on my show, it's important that you know that I know when I hear somebody that know what they're talking about. And I know when I'm talking to somebody that doesn't have a clue what they're talking about. So I don't waste my time with them. I do what I can to step off of them. I know when I hear somebody and I go, all right, this dude know what he's talking about. He know basketball. I can have a conversation with him, as opposed to other people who I know for a fact that you just want to yell, or you just want to troll, quote unquote. You just want to do stuff like that. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that at all. When I come on here, I'm interested in talking basketball. And this is a damn good Milwaukee-Miami game going on right now. So the expectation for other teams is higher. The expectation in the league isn't the same for everybody. And I get that. I do. I absolutely get that. And the reason why I get that, guys, is because I see what teams have built. And when you've built something, right? When you've built something, this is now the standard. The Lakers, over the course of the last 60, 70 years, have built something. So because they've built something, this is their tradition. This is their standard. The Knicks have built something. they've actually gone off the rails of what their standard was. And because they went off the rails, they got to get back to that. The standard wasn't making the playoffs. The standard was going deep into the playoffs. The problem with the Knicks was they kept running into Jordan. That was the problem. They kept running into Jordan. And the fact that they kept running into Jordan, that was the biggest problem that we were having. So, what up? I had him and then I lost him. See if I can get him back. Anyway, they kept running into Jordan. And I'm going to see if I can get this Milwaukee. Not Milwaukee. That's a foul too, by the way. This is a damn good Milwaukee game. Evan Mobley. Let me see what my man Evan Mobley doing right now. We're looking at almost a 2020 game from the big fella. Oh, they smoking Atlanta. I have, like I said, I got. Oh, this game's over. I didn't realize it was over. Okay. Evan Mobley went almost 20 and 20 tonight. That's pretty impressive. Yeah. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. Here's the difference, Luis. You said that that they can guard, they just can't outscore Denver. Well, maybe they don't have to outscore Denver. Maybe they can just slow Denver down and get enough. Because, again, Bruce Brown is on record saying our toughest test was against Minnesota. He said that. Good shot, Dane. He said that. The toughest test was against Minnesota. That game is over. What up?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, what up?
What's up, Chill? How's it going?
What up? Good.
I got a question for you, Chill. Not really a question, but I wanted you to check my top 10 and see if it makes some sense. Is that good?
I'm listening.
I got it. My top 10's James, Jordan, Jabbar, Russell, Wilt, Bird, Magic, Duncan, Bryant, Olajuwon.
Okay.
Is that like? That's not a.
I don't have a problem with that. I got Chamberlain. I got Chamberlain in my top 10. You got your top 10. You don't have Chamberlain. You got Bryant in it, and
I got Chamberlain.
You got Chamberlain at 5. I'm sorry. You don't have Shaq in it. That's what you don't have.
I think Bryant. If you ask me, I think Bryant ended up surpassing him later on. I think Bryant, like later on in his career, ended up surpassing Shaq. Right. Though I think when they played together, Shaq was the better player.
I just feel like what Shaq did in that period of time, I don't think that can be overstated. I mean, being the most dominant player on the planet, going to 3 NBA finals, winning all 3 NBA finals, being the finals MVP 3 straight times. Since the finals MVP was given out in 1969, him and Jordan, the only 2 dudes to do that. That's it. Can't nobody else say that.
Right, but I think that more so than anything, I think Bryant, after losing somebody like Shaq and going through the hurdles that he went throughout his career, right, and going back to the finals, and not only going back to the finals, growing as a leader.
Mm-hmm. Did I lose him? I heard growing as a leader.
Later on in his career.
I heard growing as a leader, and then I lost you.
Okay.
I heard growing as a leader.
Okay, so I think that Kobe, later on, he grew as a leader and he grew as a player, right? Which ended up, in my opinion, I think he ended up
surpassing Shaq. Sure. Mm-hmm. I understand. So I do understand that. But again, when I think, what is your criteria when you're talking about your top 10 is the $1 million question. Do you have one?
Do I have a criteria? I have a few. I don't do the air attacks thing. Right. So for me, it's like, were you elite? Not only were you elite for a long time? What's a long time? What's a long time for you? If you made 4 or 5 All-Pro teams, that's not good enough for me.
Okay.
Like 7 to 8 for me is the minimum All-Pro for you to be considered into the top 10.
So
like if you're a 5-time, if you're a 4-time All-Pro, you're not in the top 10.
Right. So if you played at an All-Pro level, so if you made the All-Pro team 8 times, that means that at minimum you played at an All-Pro level for a decade. Is that fair?
Yes, at minimum a decade. Because that's where if you look at all the top 10 players, right? All of them were either All-Pros for 10 years or were playing at an All-Pro level for 10 years.
Right.
Not only that, they were dominant in their era. We're talking about a guy in LeBron James 10 times in the NBA Finals, lost 6, but he managed to win 4. So this is a guy who's consistently going into the postseason and making deep postseason runs. Can you hear me?
Yes, I heard you. Damian Lillard just hit a 3 to tie the game with 3 minutes. We got a dogfight with Miami. And
yeah, I know. I know. I know. It's insane.
I'm listening to you. I'm
but yeah, I think that for example, in your top 10, you have Olajuwon over Bryant, right?
I do. Yes, I do.
I think that Bryant had to go through a lot more hurdles throughout that span of his career, where he just wasn't making the playoffs, and then out of nowhere they get Pau Gasol, right? And then Bryant unlocks Pau Gasol, and they managed to actually win the NBA championship twice, right? And I think those were bigger hurdles than Olajuwon when they get Clyde Drexler, and it doesn't work out. They're actually a game under 500. Right, they're a game under 500, but as soon as Olajuwon makes it into the playoffs, he dominates. Right, he dominates He dominated David Robinson. He played David Robinson. He played Karl Malone and Stockton. I believe he dominated in there too. He played Shaq in the finals, right? I'm pretty sure he played Shaq in the final.
He had to get past Barkley too.
Oh, Barkley, right? I forgot about Barkley. He had to get past Barkley. But at the same time, I think that in that Bryant's teams were a lot lesser than Olajuwon's teams, and he did more with less, if that makes sense.
So if you're talking about when he got Olajuwon in 90, Olajuwon got Drexler in 95. Remember, before Drex got there, we are leading up to 95. So you left out years like 1990, 91. You left out 91, 92. You left out, they didn't make the playoffs in 93. Don't leave those years out, because he was struggling too, just like Bryant was from 2005, 2006, 2000. Olajuwon was struggling also in 1990, 1991, 1992, 1993. He was struggling in those years too, when they were building that unit around him, when he just got Kenny Smith, when he just got Vernon Maxwell, when he just got Mario Elie. He had Otis Thorpe on the crew, when he had guys like Matt Buller, guys like that, right? So he was struggling.
But wouldn't you also say that Olajuwon had more continuity because he had some of those guys for a very long time, so they were able to build some chemistry and build kind of that camaraderie that Bryant's teams didn't have?
So just
would you say that
when they won the NBA champ, when the Lakers won the NBA championship in 2008 with Bryant, so Lamar Odom was on that crew. He had him since 2004. Luke Walton was on.
So that's crew. One. That's two.
Luke Walton was on that crew. Am I thinking about the shooter Vujicic? He was on that. Vucevic, that's him. He was on that crew also. Let's see, who else am I? I'm missing somebody also. I'm missing somebody because he had 3 guys. I think he had 3 or 4 guys, and Olajuwon had 3 guys. He had 3 or 4 guys also building that unit around him, and them developing that chemistry also. And having a guy like Lamar Odom for 5 years before we win the NBA championship, that's a pretty big deal. Having a shooter like Vucevic, having Luke, guys like that. I mean, you can't really, I can't really put a price tag on it when you're developing this kind of chemistry. Now, I'm not going to add in Bynum simply because, I mean, he's a 17-year-old kid when he gets him in 2006, right? In the 05-06 season. He doesn't even play, and he doesn't play in the NBA Finals. But with all of that being said, the best players to ever play the game. I can't just, again, leave it up to championships. The best players that ever play the game are big guys. The big guys have done more in NBA history than anybody else. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. They have the most.
Most MVPs, most defensive players of the year.
Those are big guys. That's just the way that is. And that's the era I was raised in. That's the era that I've seen. So if you got Bryant at 9, I don't have a problem with you having Bryant at 9. If you got him at 2,
no, he's not. Kobe Bryant is not the second best player in NBA history.
You got him at 2 or at 3? No.
No, I have him at 9. I have him at 9th. I think he surpassed Shaq later on in his career. Kind of like how you talked about Magic surpassing Bird later on in his career. Yes, I think that Bryant surpassed Shaq later on in his career, which I also do disagree, Chill, that I think that Magic ended up surpassing Bird later on in his career. I do think that Bird, throughout that whole 80s decade, I think he was a little more dominant. I think he just played a little bit better. He played a little bit better, right? And he played a little bit better than Magic did.
I feel like, if you ask me, I feel like in '87, that was the year that Magic surpassed Bird. '88, you can make a legit argument that Bird still was the best player in the league. It was him in '88. It was still him and Magic. I don't think that was a question, but I feel like in '87, that's when you just got finished talking about when Kobe Bryant unlocked Pau Gasol. On the '87, that's when the offense completely got turned over to Magic in the beginning of the '86-'87 season. They no longer ran the offense through Jabbar. Now you got guys like James Worthy more involved in the offense. You got Magic now the sole controller of the offense, where he can just do whatever he wants, which would explain why he averaged the most points that year, which would explain why he averaged the most assists in his career that year, which explains why they played as fast as they did that year. So I feel like '87 was when Magic ended up passing Bird. I don't feel like it was like this. I still feel like it was like this. But the problem is that Bird got hurt in the '88-'89 season. Magic won league MVP that year. So now what's happening is the gap is now starting to, now the gap is starting to widen. So then not only does Magic win the league MVP in '89, wins it again in '90. And Bird is going the other way. So now that gap is starting to widen even longer. So I feel like you could stick around too long and get passed up. That could definitely happen. So the argument that Bryant passed Shaq later on in his career, if it's based solely on championships, you can make that argument, and it's a legit argument. And also as a player, because I feel like Bryant in 2000, after they won that championship, when they beat Boston in 2010, I think Bryant was the best player on the planet. And I think that it was, I'm not going to say it was undisputed because I still felt like James was right there, but I think it was legit that he was the best player on the planet at that point. I can't say that about Shaq in year 15. I can't.
Okay, so you do agree? So you do think that there is like a case for Kobe to be better than Shaq, right?
You can make. I think you just made it. Sure, I think you just made it. My case is the best players to ever play are big guys. The fact that Shaq did what he did with Bryant on the unit, and after Bryant left, how good he still was. Don't get me wrong. By 07, 08, 09, I mean, I feel like that Shaq was over. But for the time that he was dominant, there wasn't a question who the guy was. So I think that time can't compare to whatever Bryant did late. That's why I can't put him ahead of Shaq, even if I didn't know him. For that reason right there. So.
All right.
Yep.
That's fair. All right, Chill. You have a good one.
All right, brother. Out. This logic right here is bugging me out. Kobe Bryant, the Lou podcast says Kobe Bryant from 2007 to 2010 was the best player in the league, barring injuries. I'm asking you today, in 2023, when do we have a player? Oh, let me rephrase that. What made Kobe Bryant the best player in the league in 2007? Let me ask you that. I'm interested to know that. What made him the best player in 2007? I got some super chats I got to read too. So let's see here. Suits drops me a super chat. He says, what do the Hornets need to do to get better? Is Brandon Miller going to be a great player? Tired of seeing my team awful. Suits, first of all, your franchise player needs to stay on the floor. So LaMelo is going to be out for a significant amount of time. I think you got a player in Brandon Miller. Miles Bridges has to get back acclimated to the NBA game. He's been out a whole season and a half, right? We haven't seen him since the 21-22 season. He's been out a whole season. So he's got to get back acclimated to the pro game. Gordon Hayward is on the other side of who he used to be. Your franchise player needs to be on the floor more than anything. And then once you're doing that, I'm a big fan of Mark Jones. I think you got your franchise big. But the question is can we build continuity with this group? If you could do that, then I think you're in business. Man, Sports says to me, how good was Damon Stoudemire as a player? Mighty Mouse was awesome, man. Pint size, 5'10", left-handed, ridiculous athlete, could score on anybody, get downhill with the best of them, had a really good mid-range, could knock down the long ball. He was fantastic. Yes, he was. 100%. I was a big fan of Damon Stoudemire. He was really good. MP13 says, how's your night going, Chill? I see you burning the midnight oil with the graveyard stream. Good actual basketball conversation. That's what I try to do around here, my man. That's what I try to do around here. So if I can't do that, then I ain't doing nothing. If I can't do that, then I'm not doing anything. So, honestly, his offense was just the best. But I think his defense and willing to take on the toughest defensive assignments made him the best in 2007. That was Duncan. Duncan was doing that too. That's how the San Antonio Spurs were winning, because Duncan actually changed his game because of the emergence of guys like Manu Ginobili and guys like Tony Parker, who got better. So Duncan now segued himself into that's why they were some of the best defensive teams that you had seen in the league, because what Duncan was doing defensively on that unit. So the defensive gap, right? The defensive logic, I'm not sure I'm buying that. Offensively or as a scorer, Bryant was fantastic. I don't think that there's a question of whether or not. I mean, you could try to argue Bryant as a scorer, but there's no way there's no way you can really give legit logic. No way you can do that. So, and just so you know, Lou, Duncan was always the first option. Yes, he was always the first option. The difference was he took a step back. It wasn't like when Jabbar had to be the second option with the Lakers because he got old. That wasn't the case with Duncan. Duncan took a step back because of the emergence of Tony Parker, not because he was slowing down. He still was awesome. He just became more of a defensive force. He still was doing that. And he could still give you 18 to 22 on a Tuesday. That's who Duncan was as a number one option. And as a number two, he was 19 and 10. So I think Duncan was the best player from 2003 to 2007, and then Kobe started to take over. I think it was a conversation in Bryant made his case 07-08 when he won the league MVP. As much as I felt like James was a better player, Bryant being the 07-08 MVP and going to the NBA Finals that year, and then in 08-09, him going back to the NBA Finals and winning the championship and winning the Finals MVP. Because when you talk about being the best player on the planet, what you produce as a player individually matters. And I still felt like at that point, James was better, but the fact that Bryant was winning, that was the separator. That was the separator. And when he won it in 09 and then won it again in 10, unfortunately, as much as I felt like Bryant, as much as I felt like James was the better, I couldn't deny that Bryant, if I'm going off what my logic is as the best player on the planet, I couldn't deny that Bryant was the best player on the planet. I couldn't do that. Could not do that. Daniel Mason sends the super chat. Daniel Mason says, this Bucks game is crazy. They need Alex Caruso bad. Well, we all know who Milwaukee is as a defensive team, because what did they just lose? Yeah, what did they just lose? Right? The fact that they lost arguably the best perimeter defender in the game and replaced him with a scoring guard. It's not enough. No, it's not enough. They're going to need some help defensively on the wing, because we're not going to be able to just go 130 to 135 every night against teams. We're going to have to slow some teams down, especially the better teams in the league, like the Miami Heat, like Indiana. Teams that score a lot. We're going to have to slow these guys down. We have to. So, graphical, it's interesting you mentioned the back-to-back finals and the Olympics, because would we be saying that same thing if Carmelo Anthony won the NBA championship? I'm wondering. How would we be talking about Carmelo Anthony if he won the NBA championship? Would we be talking about him the same way? Because, I mean, he's arguably the most decorated Olympic athlete in USA basketball history. Nobody has scored more points in the history of Olympic basketball than Carmelo Anthony. I think he's got the most gold medals. So, I mean, if we're using that metric, which I can get with, are we leaving out the other stuff? So, like, if he won the NBA championship, I mean, would that matter? Just wondering. I'm just wondering how that goes. That's all. Yeah, yeah. And Lou, a lot of people don't want to talk about that, but he is, for real. He's not sort of kind of that. He is. And he's revered in other countries. Only in America where they, at the Olympics. I remember, and I got to get going, guys, but I remember a story. I don't know if you guys remember. He used to play for the Utah Jazz. He was from Turkey. His name is Mehmet Okur. Mehmet Okur played. He's from Turkey. And in 2000, Kobe Bryant had gotten married. That's why he didn't play on the Olympic team in 2000, because he got married that summer. And Mehmet Okur said, he's on record saying, if Turkey would have made the Olympics, my wedding would have got pushed back. That's how they feel about internet. That's how they feel about the Olympics in other countries. That's how big a deal the Olympics are in other countries. So, with that being said, right? With that being said, Carmelo Anthony as an Olympic athlete, I mean, there aren't many who are more decorated than him. There aren't. So, it's about that time for me, guys. It is good to see you tonight. It was dope to see you guys tonight. I will be back soon. Yes, I did see Julius Randle go for 20 and 20. I'm not surprised about that at all. The reason why is because Charlotte is a dumpster fire, and they're going to be bad now that LaMelo Ball is out the lineup for at least a month. He's going to be out of the lineup for at least a month. So, it was great to see you guys tonight. It's basketball season, man. I will see you guys really soon. This play-in tournament is fantastic. I love every bit of it. Quietly, because I was objective. I was an objective hater when it came to the play-in tournament. I was not feeling it, but I'm actually feeling it. Right? I'm actually feeling the play-in tournament, right? And I'm actually digging what's going on with it. I'm not sold yet, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that, you know, I'm 100% in, but I'm feeling this a lot more. I'm feeling this a lot more than I did a couple months ago. I am. And the more this happens, I feel like if this is what the competition is going to be, I'm definitely going to be involved in it. No question about it, though. So we will see you dudes in Philadelphia on Sunday, Lou. Yes, we will. So, but until then, guys, take it light. Take it.